$29 billion. Virtual reality meets the warfighter. Again. This is Military Matters. I'm Roger. This episode of Military Matters is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal puts members first by helping them save money, make money, and enjoy peace of mind and security through personalized around-the-clock service. On average, Navy Federal members earn and save $361 more per year. You can pay no fees, get low rates, and rate discounts, plus earn cash back and grow your savings. Visit NavyFederal.org for more information. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Jack Murphy.
1995. A young Keanu Reeves is racing around a dystopian future trying to get rid of the data stuck in a hard drive implanted in his head. You see, that hard drive, despite having a whopping 320 gigabytes, wasn't enough to contain what had been uploaded to it. So now, he had to jump into cyberspace, the internet of the future, to track down clues to save his life. I was 15 years old watching Johnny Mnemonic jack into the internet using a virtual reality visor and gloves. He navigated through a world of polygons, brightly colored shapes that barely resembled floppy disks, computer screens, and city landscapes. He did all of this using gloves instead of a keyboard, manipulating virtual hands using gestures. The whole thing, to me at the time, was awe-inspiring. The internet was going to be a cyberpunk simulation of real life. Now it's 2021, and sadly, the future foretold in the film Johnny Mnemonic didn't come true. It was actually kind of a bummer to see that instead of virtual reality visors, we got a mouse and a keyboard. And the internet, although amazing, is still for the most part a two-dimensional world of windows, frames, and scrolling. Also, that massive 325 gigabyte hard drive of the future Johnny was rocking is now less than the capacity of the hard drive that comes standard with a PlayStation 4.
The first time I heard about virtual reality was back in the 1990s. I mean, it was probably like 1993 or something like that. It became the term virtual reality became mainstreamed. And I remember a whole television show, and I think maybe it was called VR. It was like a science fiction, like a near-term science fiction show. And it was like this girl, like there's some Inception stuff going on. The female protagonist was trying to get to different levels of VR. Like, oh my God, no one's ever been to VR 8 before. So it's like becoming popularized. Like we were all becoming more aware that there's this thing, virtual reality, but it fizzled out. The technology, I guess, because I don't know all of the reasons, but I remember seeing a very primitive form of virtual reality at the Liberty Science Center in New Jersey, going there as a kid in grade school. And it was just very primitive, and it was very difficult to use. And that was just like a demonstrator. So after seeing it go away, it just seemed like one of those like hyped, promised technologies that just never really came to pass, like many other things, like the flying car. Never quite got off the ground. Ha ha.
Terrible pun aside, virtual reality would continue to make its way into pop culture again and again, each time promising something spectacular, but the versions offered to the public would always seem to come up shy of the polished visions found in movies and TV. But now it seems that the pendulum is finally swinging the other way. Virtual reality and augmented reality have gained a lot of ground in the last 5 to 10 years. Last October, a cool 25 years after Johnny Mnemonic, Oculus, the company that pioneered virtual reality technology and is now a division of Facebook, released the Oculus Quest, a commercially available virtual reality headset that quickly became one of the best-selling toys, technology. Not sure how you would describe it, but the public ate it up. Technology reviewers praised its lightweight, clarity, brilliance, and controls. I own my own Quest 2, and I can attest that it is an amazing piece of technology. And for the first time, I felt like, wow, this is way better than anything in Johnny Mnemonic. But it wasn't just me. The Army felt the same way, not necessarily about the Quest 2, but about another technology coming instead from Microsoft called Hololens. Hololens has been described as a mixed reality technology. So virtual is where you're fully immersed in the digital environment. Everywhere you look, 360 degrees is virtual. Augmented reality is where you're seeing the world, but with some virtual aspects such as a heads-up display, or if you or your kid ever played Pokemon Go, you'd see the little creature hanging out in the real world. That's augmented technology. HoloLens is trying to bring mixed reality, something that promises to allow a user to physically interact with real objects and virtual objects in exactly the same way. Think of Tony Stark from the Iron Man movies when he's interacting with a hologram to design his suit. He touches and moves his arms through the hologram, and the hologram in turn reacts to his arm so that he can virtually try on pieces of the armor before it's ever built. The Army isn't just interested in the world of virtual, augmented, and mixed reality. It's betting on it. In fact, it's betting $21.9 billion over the next 10 years. The Army wants to put the HoloLens technology to work on its latest program, the Integrated Visual Augmentation System, or IVAS.
This is the IVAS program. It's a soldier augmentation system that Microsoft is building based on their consumer and enterprise HoloLens product.
That's Palmer Luckey. He founded the company Oculus when he was only 19 years old, then sold it to Facebook in 2014 for about $2 billion.
I sold that to Facebook, moved it to Silicon Valley for a few years, built that team up to about 1,400 people before I was fired by Facebook. I immediately got to working in the national security space with my new company, Anduril, where we're building artificial intelligence and autonomous systems for the U.S. military and our partners abroad.
Palmer's been in the virtual reality space from pretty much the beginning, and he's also worked with the Department of Defense on a variety of projects. He's very familiar with the HoloLens technology, but despite its gee-whiz-wow performance, the Army's interest in integrating this kind of tech with its soldiers isn't new.
They're adding different imaging sensors, threat detection software, and a few other things that the consumer bit is not going to be doing. The interesting thing about HoloLens and IVAS and all of this is that it's not a new idea. If you look back into DoD history, this idea of putting a heads-up display and a computer and a radio on every fighter has been around for a very long time. I mean, I think like that's kind of what Land Warrior was originally all going to be about, and Net Warrior and Future Soldier. Like they keep doing this over and over again. And each time it doesn't quite stick. It doesn't quite get anywhere. And it's because there's this balance between the burden that you impose, like the weight, the cost, the lack of maneuverability, and versus the benefit, and heightened situational awareness, the ability to parse information more effectively. And so I think there's never been the balance has never been on the right side of things. It's always been, too much information overload, very heavy, very power hungry. And, there's things you'd rather be carrying than this future warrior system or heads-up display. And I think that things are finally getting onto the right side of the equation now.
The right side of the equation Palmer's talking about has everything to do with how VR technology has evolved. A few years ago, I was given a demo of a virtual reality program that was going to be pitched to the military. The headset was kind of heavy, there were a lot of wires and cords, and the visuals inside the viewer didn't look great. There was this weird squared texture thing. It was like looking through a screen door. All in all, I did not like it. I also felt like the virtual reality aspect didn't bring anything to the table. Everything I was seeing in VR was nothing that couldn't be equally represented using a two-dimensional conventional map.
If I had talked to you 4 years ago and you had said, I don't really see the point, I think VR is not really all that great, and I don't think it's going to be that good. The thing I always tell people is, no, you're not against VR. You're just against VR as it is today. Imagine if I told you could put on a pair of 50-gram glasses that cost $99, and it's like the Matrix. You can do anything, experience anything, and it's as if it was real. Everyone agrees that they would want that. And I would debate this with the press, who would tell me that they're not interested in VR. I would make the hypothetical I just made to them. They'd say, well, VR is nothing like that. And I'd say, well, not yet. It could be that it's not good enough for you. And it comes back to what I said earlier. It's that It's that benefit to burden ratio. And for them, the benefit is not there versus the burden. But as the cost comes down and the quality goes up and the use cases go up, eventually it's going to be a no-brainer. This is going to be, again, maybe something you wouldn't expect, but I actually agree with you in that a lot of VR use cases today would be better as a 2D interface. They would be better as a map. And the VR people really need to I guess, shape up on this.
A number of years ago, there was a big push for VR. There was a belief it was going to be the next big thing.
That's Garth Smith, Meta VR co-founder and president.
It was probably heavily oversold, which tends to be somewhat of a tendency in the United States for the overselling and what have you. But what has been happening sort of quietly is there has been significant technology developments, especially in the mixed reality area. And some of it's sort of mind-bending how well it works. And some of it's just only recently gotten working very well.
Meta VR created a virtual JTAC trainer, JTACs being the Joint Terminal Attack Controllers. These are service members trained to direct the action of combat aircraft engaged in close air support and other offensive air operations from a forward position. JTAC training is tough, considering you need to put a fighter jet in the air and you need to be able to drop millions of dollars of ordnance on a training area.
It's very expensive if you're doing live training, because obviously, you're looking at $70,000 an hour to run a standard 4th gen jet. Gareth
Seburn, Meta VR's JTAC, Joint Fire's SME, and technical systems developer.
Just for 20 minutes of work for the JTAC, because by the time the jet transits to the range, does his trade and goes home, you only get about 20 minutes. And obviously, if you've got multiple JTACs on the ground, there's not a whole lot of time for them to get proper training.
Although Gareth is now part of the Meta VR team creating virtual JTAC training, he wasn't always a believer in virtual training.
My first VR, and I was dead against VR, because my first foray into VR was, like I was saying earlier, it was a 40,000 pound headset that was just a letterbox that just all hung in front of your face. And I only used it when I was actually training to be an operator for that system. I'd never used it to train with computers. I hated it. It was stupid, because not only were the graphics set in the mid-90s, but it was this letterbox that sort of hung in front of your face. And I never touched VR then until 2014, 2015, when Oculus Rift came out. Mm-hmm. And we got the DV1, I think it was, the very first developer headset. And, I was messing about with it, and, I was like, I just didn't like it. And I was playing, there's this game called DCS, and I took one of the headsets home with me, and I plugged it into my laptop, and I was playing this flight sim game, and I hated it. It was just made me sick. It made me queasy, and the latency. And I'm by far not the most experienced person or qualified person to talk VR. I know how to use it, but I don't know how it's implemented in terms of how the coders do all their stuff. But I just didn't like it.
Meta VR is taking the kind of experience Gareth brings to the fight as a JTAC to create a mixed reality training environment where JTACs are no longer constrained by time or the cost of keeping a plane in the air.
You can just pull it out on a daily basis and go, right, guys, because it takes 10 minutes. Literally, I'm not making this an advert. It literally takes 10 minutes to set this thing up, our portable system. Yeah, so the mixed reality it's effectively still a virtual reality headset, right? You're still wearing a virtual reality headset, so it still covers your face or covers your eyes. And what it does is when you turn on the mixed reality portion, we've created a hole inside that virtual space where you can see the real. When you look left, it'll be the virtual world. When you look right, it'll be the virtual. But if you look at this particular area, everything that you pass through that is the real. So when you put your hand in, because it's got the cameras on the front, that's the real. When you look at your feet won't be there. But when you look up into this particular area, you can see your radios, your GPS receiver, your LTD, or anything that's in that space you can see.
Jack, when you were in SF, did you get a chance to use virtual training equipment like what Meta VR is describing?
I mean, nothing that cool. When we learned how to use the Stinger anti-aircraft missile and the Javelin anti-tank missile system, it was on a simulator, but really it's just a TV screen. So you're pointing the control module at a television screen and firing, as I recall. And then when I was in group and we learned how to use the SF-10 parachute. There's like now that I think about it, a little kind of virtual reality simulator thing that you went into, and you were in a harness and you pull your toggles. It was very like 16-bit Super Mario Brothers style graphics, but they used it to familiarize you with the parachute.
Virtual and augmented training have a specific goal to prepare the warfighter before they go hands-on. But some critics of this type of training argue that it's just not the same, that you can't really learn from an experience that isn't real. Palmer Luckey disagrees.
And it's so cool because like this is something that you couldn't do, let's say, reading a book or watching a video. Like you can actually learn, like, you take the weapon, you have to do all the proper manipulations. You have to drop the magazine, lock the bolt back, put the new mag in, like let the bolt go like that. It's not the same as actually doing it for real. But if you know how to do it in VR, you will definitely be able to figure out what to do the first time you're handed the real thing. And that's a big step from if you were just reading about it in a book.
When we come back from the break, there's another side to that JTAC training, and that's the jets flying overhead dropping the ordnance. Flight training has been a crucial part of VR and AR development, so is creating the environment that ordnance is being dropped on, from cities to mountainsides. We'll talk about the good and the not so good of VR and AR training, and why the military is choosing now to double down on this capability when we return. If you're an active duty service member, veteran, DoD civilian, or military family member, you can join Navy Federal. That means if you served in any branch of the military, doesn't have to just be the Navy, could be the Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, or Coast Guard, you can join the Navy Federal Credit Union. On average, Navy Federal members earn and save $361 more per year. You could pay no fees, get low rates and rate discounts, plus earn cash back and grow your savings. Navy Federal puts members first by helping them save money, make money, and enjoy peace of mind and security through personalized around-the-clock service. Plus, now is a great time to join. Have a large credit card balance after the holidays? Let Navy Federal Credit Union help you rebalance your priorities. Make a plan to do away with high-interest credit card debt by transferring your balance to a Navy Federal credit card. With a low intro APR and no balance transfer fees, you can pick the right card to help you take back control. Visit NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission. And now the fine print. Insured by NCUA. Dollar value of Navy Federal's 2019 member give back study. 5.99 to an 18% variable APRs based on product type and credit worthiness, up to $1 cash advance transaction fee at non-Navy Federal ATMs.
With our first pilot training customers, a lot of them had seen virtual reality and it wasn't good enough for them. And it was a really specific thing. They couldn't read the switches.
That's Kevin Cornish. He's the CEO of Moth+Flame Virtual Reality. Their company is designing virtual reality simulations for the U.S. Air Force.
It was too blurry, too pixelated. And they were like, this doesn't work for me. I need to read little switches. If I can't read them, it's useless. And I remember having those conversations with some people and thinking, wow, there's got to be a way to solve that. And then go into a base, shooting a cockpit, and then showing those same people and watching them take the headset off and just be like, wow, yeah, looks just like the cockpit. I get it. And you just see the conversion in over the course of 5 minutes. Somebody who's like, virtual reality, no. And then they take the headset off. They're like a little kid. And it's just like, wow.
Virtual flight simulations like the JTAC training we mentioned earlier tackle the issue of providing low-cost training compared to the cost of flying jets for hours on end. But this low-cost solution has the potential to also become a pitfall for military training.
Something that the military is going to have to be very careful about. I guarantee you there's going to be a bureaucratic inertia to do all training in virtual reality, because some bean counters are going to look at it like, look how much money we can save. They're going to go to their bosses and like, this is how much money we're going to be able to save doing this. Not that the military is so squeamish about using taxpayer dollars, but somewhere, it's somebody somewhere, whether it's in Congress or DoD, it's going to be like, we can save tons of money by just doing this in the simulator. And the military, for sure, they'll look at it, their risk mitigation matrices and be like, look at how much risk we're mitigating by doing this in the simulator, that we're not going to have no soldier will ever be shot accidentally doing this training. Nobody's going to trip and break their ankle out at the range. No one's probably ever going to get heat exhaustion in a training simulator. So there's definitely going to be a bureaucratic inertia that DoD is going to have to resist, that they're going to have to be aware of. Otherwise, because if you do training just in a simulator, the guys are not going to be prepared for combat. And I'm telling you, this is hard to articulate maybe to the average person, but when you're going into the shoot house with live rounds, green tip rounds, and a loaded rifle, it is a different experience than it is in any kind of freaking video game. And when you're shooting that rifle a foot away from your buddy to your left and right, shooting targets a foot or two away from one of your buddies, it's a different experience. Psychologically, it's different, not just, physically.
Kevin Cornish.
The only thing that we can do is develop responsible practices and ethics around how the technology is used. And so when we think about fears, it's the day-to-day decisions and the kind of always be conscious that are the best ways to be addressing the long-term fears, in our opinion.
As simulators have evolved, there has been an ever-growing fear virtual training might replace real training. In the early 2000s, the engagement skill trainer was introduced to the Army as a means of replicating a firing range. Using a screen, projector, and weapons hooked up to air compressors to replicate recoil, the EST was a cheaper, safer, and more accessible alternative to a real firing range. For units that can't get enough ammo or reserve training time on a range, these simulators can feel like they're better doing something than nothing. But still, critics argued that the military was slowly drifting to replacing real bullets with digital pixels. Palmer Luckey.
Now, when it comes to dependence on technology, I would say that VR is probably too much of a scapegoat here. Like, I would say right now the dependence is a function of policy. I think DoD just has to have good policy around that, and they probably need to not let those skills deteriorate. And actually, if I remember correctly, the U.S. Navy got rid of a lot of courses for navigating in certain ways after the introduction of GPS satellites. They said, hey, it's old school. We don't need this anymore. You don't have to have the ability to, read the stars and pull out your sextant and, read everything. But they've actually brought that back recently because they're looking at the denial capabilities of the Russians, denial capabilities of the Chinese, and saying, if there's a real conflict, we might not have GPS satellites for very long. We might not have the ability to receive the signals for very long. And so I think that's going to be the solution. I know the solution is not going to be don't use technology on your best day because it'll screw you on your worst day. It's use technology on your best day and be ready for that worst day.
The warfighter is certainly the focus of much of the intent behind acquiring VR and AR tech. But developing virtual landscapes and cities can have another use. The Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, has been a very interested partner in creating virtual cities.
It's from their training standpoint. They'll have a trainer who may be doing a mission rehearsal with one of their participants who's going to be in a specific city. And that trainer has never been to that city, doesn't really know it.
That's Tony Isaacs. Tony is the Vice President of Business Development for PLW ModelWorks, a company that creates city models from 2D imagery.
So by being able to immerse themselves in VR, they can actually learn the city and better prepare the trainee to interact in the city for different types of scenarios. And to be honest, that's about as much detail as I get when I'm discussing what their end use is. I've seen some of the stuff that they're doing, and it's that they have some active shooter scenarios that I've seen where they, are okay, how do we take down if an active shooter is in this area? What's our approach, and how, where's our lines of sight? So I've seen that sort of thing as well. But I'm sure there's much more that they're considering beyond that.
The ability to create virtual environments, cities, forests, tunnel systems, opens an entire new world of possibilities for special operations and intelligence. Instead of trying to physically replicate sensitive locations around the world, you can run teams through something as simple as navigating a foreign airport to conducting a raid on a high-value target in a hardened location.
But having the true 3D city content is something that can really allow the folks an idea of what they're getting into for mission planning and rehearsal. So by having a true 3D model of the city in VR, it allows them to interact with that city in almost a normal way and to better prepare for some kind of a mission. So there's been some, definitely success there. And I know other DIA, along with other agencies, and are really looking at VR and augmented reality as well.
The bottom line here is that even the best simulation is still a simulation. And like Jack said earlier, there's a psychological effect that a warfighter experiences when things go live. Virtual reality environments, whether it's a jet fighter cockpit or a city landscape, there will still be elements of live that shouldn't go away. And the biggest advocate for continuing live fire exercises are the VR developers themselves. Gareth Seburn.
There's definitely a time and a place for sim and a time and place for real world. You know, you can never ever take away the real world. You know, again, for JTAC, you know, we have to train in a simulator because it's so expensive to train outside the world, but you still need to get that JTAC in the real world, because that moment, the first time you talk to a fighter jet, a real jet and a real pilot in the sky, the ass puckering moment of, oh my God, I'm talking to a real jet that's burning gas in the sky, and especially when you first time drop ordnance. There's nothing that can replace that. Sim cannot replace that. What sim does is it gives you that gradual learning curve, rather than going, all right, guys, day one, we're going to be outside talking to a jet. And it's like, whoa, because that's pretty much what it was when I went through. I did a couple of, sat in a classroom talking through a 9-line. Then next thing I know, I'm at the backside of the classroom, outside the building, next to the runway, talking to a hawk, going, oh my God, I'm now talking to a fighter jet that's, sat at 5,000 foot. Having that gradual learning curve of learning the mouth music, getting those mistakes out early rather than wasting gas. It's definitely has its place, but it can't replace. Sim can never ever replace the live environment. You have to always follow sim with a live environment.
So virtual reality training, whether it's completely virtual, augmented, or a mix, saves money, expands training to include more people, and in some cases, it can be extremely mobile. But what really matters at the end of the day is staying ahead of the enemy and our near peers in the conventional military sense. We kind of have a better idea of what our simulation technology looks like today and where it's going. But what about other countries? Where do they sit with simulation technology?
Russia is nowhere close to us when it comes to optoelectronics technology and the ability to build the networking backend, computing backend, and display front end that you need to do something like this. So it's a pretty durable advantage, I think, and I'm glad DoD is prioritizing it.
That's a pretty important fact to consider when you look at how advanced Russia's other military capabilities are. Doubling down on technology we currently have an advantage in can put us far ahead of our nation's competitors. And if that translates to deadliness and readiness, well, that could be a serious deciding factor in future conflicts.
Goes back to what I was saying a minute ago. They will know when to use these technologies, when not to use them, and how to blend them, how to turn them on and off and adapt them, just like you adapt your tactics. Any other, battlefield infantry tactics, you adapt to your environment and the enemy situation. They will understand, the younger people than us, they will understand how and when and why to use these technologies in the best manner. And they will probably do that in ways that, the manufacturers don't even expect them to.
Maybe you're still on the fence about virtual reality visors, helmets, glasses, whatever. Maybe you're thinking, not me, you'll never catch me wearing something like that. Palmer Luckey thinks you probably will.
The idea is that you have full VR on one side of the spectrum, where you're in a totally different place, you don't see the real world. And then you have augmented reality way on the other side of the spectrum, where you're seeing the real world with a little bit of information thrown in. But there's actually going to be a lot of time that we spend in the future, I think, on that spectrum in between those things. For example, imagine if I was sitting here in this room and then the wall on the side of me disappears and turns into a full 3D model of my friend's room where he is now sitting. Now, this is kind of interesting. Like, yes, I'm here in my real space, but I'm also looking into a space that is, also real, but also virtual, at least from my perspective. You can imagine things like saying, I'm going to take my house and I'm going to fully reskin it. I'm going to live in live in a Gothic castle, even though it's actually just a blank apartment. And at that point, it's kind of blurs. Like, is that VR? Well, I'm walking through a place that's kind of the same shape as my house, but it's fundamentally transformed into a new thing using augmented reality technology. And I don't know where people are going to spend all their time in the future, but I do strongly believe that at some point in our lives, you're going to spend most of your time somewhere on that spectrum. Maybe it's more virtual, maybe it's more augmented. I personally am leaning more towards the virtual side. Why rely on the real world when you can make anything and everything possible in VR? But everyone's going to be somewhere on that spectrum.
Although my family does have a Quest 2, I don't use it every day, not even every week. I've played with the thing a handful of times, and although it was fun, it's not something I see myself using every day. And with that thought, I kind of began to dismiss the whole idea of virtual and augmented reality all over again. When the hell would I ever use this stuff or need this in my daily life? I was driving to the store thinking about exactly this when I looked up at the speedometer hologram on my windshield that told me how fast I was going and the directions to the store. That simple hologram, I realized, is something I've been using since I bought my car. I just never thought about it being there. Now suddenly, I find myself a daily user of a type of augmented reality.
I mean, I have the same thing, a little heads up display on my vehicle. And, for, older folks like you and I, maybe that future is just that. It's in your eyeglasses or your contact lenses. It's, your route is highlighted in like a light blue color on the road as you drive. Wherever you look, you can see it and follow it, just giving you directions all the time, like a version of Google Maps or something that's in your eye, literally. And then there's probably going to be other people who are like some sort of caricature out of a sci-fi movie where they're just like big fat guy in a reclining chair with a VR headset on 24/7, and like his girlfriend is Asuka from Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's like, introduces this virtual e-girl to his mom. I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's probably going to affect societies in ways that we can't even imagine right now.
Some of you have no idea what Neon Genesis Evangelion is, and that's fine. You don't have to. The point is, this technology is already here, and you're probably already using it. The question is, where on the simulation scale Palmer Luckey was talking about will you find yourself sliding into? COVID quarantines closed lots of doors, and isolation was a very real thing many of us experienced. But VR could change the way we spend our quote-unquote alone time. We could be in virtual environments with our friends and families, sharing a version of quality time while our men and women in uniform are doing everything from designing the latest armored vehicle plating to practicing barrel rolls in an experimental jet that hasn't even been built yet. And if you think that's the end, that's as far as this can evolve, think again. Elon Musk has been talking about brain implants that will let you control elements of a virtual reality, of a virtual world with your mind.
And so then the next conclusion from that is that we then put the AI inside our brain, infuse it in some manner with our own organic tissue. And that's the next stage of human evolution. That's really the game changer. It reminds me of that scene in Ghostbusters where he's like, this reminds me of the time you tried to drill a hole in your head. And Egon's like, that would have worked if you hadn't stopped me.
I want to thank our guests, Garth Smith, Gareth Seburn, Kevin Cornish, Tony Isaacs, and the godfather of virtual reality, Mr. Palmer Luckey. This episode was written and produced by me, Rod Rodriguez, and Jack Murphy. Executive produced by Joe Fleming. Make a plan to do away with high-interest credit card debt by transferring your balance to a Navy Federal Credit Union credit card. With a low intro APR and no balance transfer fees, you can pick the right card to help you take back control. Visit NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal Credit Union, our members are the mission. Folks, leave us a review and a 5-star rating on whatever podcast player you use. Those reviews really do help us reach new audiences. And be sure to share this podcast. We grow through word of mouth, so share this podcast. You can find Military Matters everywhere you listen to podcasts, or go to stripes.com and click on the podcast tab. We're always free to listen to, but you can use promo code podcast and save 50% on your digital subscription to Stars and Stripes. You can also follow us on Twitter at StripesMMPod. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
I'm Jack Murphy.
We'll see you at the next episode.